Hello, everybody. I want to talk to you today about what I'm going to call wholeness. All right, and it's what we would. It's more than, both more than and less than what we would normally refer to as oneness. Because when we think of oneness, I think that most of us think of the universe, of manifestation, and the mind can't go prior to that. I mean, like there was, if you go back to try to trace back the Big Bang, and about the best that scientists can do is tell you that nothing exploded. That's about what they can tell you. And that's really, and that's about the truth. And the mind cannot go there, which is perfect, because the mind cannot understand wholeness. See, the mind is actually part of wholeness. It can't understand wholeness because it's not a part in the sense that it's like a distinct separate part, because there's only wholeness. What we're doing is using words now to sort of, just so that we can talk about that which can't be talked about, right? I remember the first student I ever had, I used to tell her, well, come on in and let's not talk about what we can't talk about, right? And that's the way of it. But at that time, I didn't understand what I'm talking about now. Is that right? Because I thought I actually knew what we were talking about. I just couldn't put it into words. I couldn't put it into words that she would understand. But that's not actually true, because it can't be put into words, because the words would have to be also wholeness. And when if I say part, it's just a linguistic error on my part. Now, that was correct use of part. But wholeness is all encompassing. And the Greek Stoics had something that they had, what they called I keep trying to say oneness, but what is it? It's the logos. So the logos was that which both created that which contained and ordered this. See, and there was no differentiation. There was just this. In other words, what they were saying is the same thing I say all the time, which is that there's just one thing going on. But see, when I tell you that there's just one thing going on, that is what we would call a provisional teaching. In other words, I teach that to people because I know that it's a useful term, and it's a useful understanding. And the recognition of oneness, in fact, is useful enough that we call it enlightenment. But the only thing that can recognize oneness is oneness. So there's certainly not going to be a Fred who's enlightened because he understands oneness, because there's no Fred here. There's only wholeness. There's wholeness and only wholeness. And what's talking here is wholeness. What's listening to this is wholeness. The computer is wholeness, the air is wholeness, and this is really the closest we can get. Is if we look at the air, we got everything exactly backwards. I call this the backwards teaching, and it's a very, very good reason, and that's the fact that everything works backwards than the way you think it does. And I don't understand how things work. I just know they work backwards from the way that we think. There is no understanding how things work because there are no things. There's just wholeness. And there's no way to understand or to be able to actually talk about wholeness, because only wholeness could talk, right? And the words would have to be also wholeness. So we can use discrimination, is the way that Buddha put it. We can use discrimination in order to, and when we do, then we can just determine that there's a bookshelf here, and there's a bread here, and there's a Buddha here. But we don't want to grab hold of that as if any of that's true. because what we want to do is the discrimination means we want to discriminate between the true and the false. And what's true, without naming anything, and let's look at that for just a minute, just one of you, right? So why would you need language? Why would wholeness need language? What would wholeness talk to? When would wholeness talk to what? I mean, it can only talk to wholeness, which would also, that conversation would also be part of wholeness. See what I mean? It shatters the brain. It just doesn't. It can't hold it. Don't even try it. That's the key. Don't even try to understand this video. Listen to this video. Do not try to understand it. I should have said that right up front, but I'll say it now. Don't try to understand it, because this is not understandable. One of the biggest leaps that I ever made along the so-called path to awakening was the recognition that there's no understanding wholeness. There's just not. I mean, this thing weighs 3 or 4 pounds. It's about the size of a big rat, and it thinks that it understands everything outside of it, but there's no possible way that the mind can. And just so you know, there's nothing outside of the mind, because there's no particular mind. There's nothing in the mind. There's nothing outside of the mind. There's no mind, but there's the appearance of a mind. There's the experience of a mind. So we can't say that there's, I mean, I've just said that there's no mind, and that's absolutely true. It's not relatively true. See, here's our big thing, isn't it? Is that what I'm talking about in this video is I'm looking from the absolute view, and I'm trying to give, to sort of radiate something through the language, so that, and I could say I'm trying to, express nothing through the language, and then that would be equally correct, because it can't be described in language. But what happens is that a talk like this can go beyond the mind, right? It's not answering intellectual questions, because there are no intellectual answers to this. So get rid of your intellectual questions. And if you're making notes or doing drawings or whatever, writing things down and trying to put 2 and 2 together to come up with 4, it just doesn't work. It just does not work here. Let it go. The best thing I can tell you is that since there's already wholeness, what do you need to recognize? What could recognize anything? If there's just wholeness, what could recognize wholeness if it stumbled onto it? And how would wholeness stumble onto wholeness? Because that makes it sound like there's wholeness and something over there, and there's no there. There's just wholeness. So there's no one that can recognize wholeness. So give it up. You're trying to recognize, you're trying to see wholeness. You're trying to see wholeness objectively. Can't happen. Cannot happen. Quit trying. Quit trying. I know it's very difficult, but I just want to tell you this. Quit trying. Quit. So really, just stop trying. Just be still with me right now. But not that there's a me here and a you there. See, and there's nothing over here that's enlightened, that's trying to either encourage or orient enlightenment over there. But that's the experience. There's an experience of Fredness. There's an experience actually that there's a sense that there's a Fred here, and there's a sense that there's a Fred here because it's a felt sense. We have a felt sense of agency. But since there's wholeness, let's count how many wholenesses there are. I believe there's just one. So if there's just wholeness, then what is it that could look for wholeness. I mean, it'd have to be wholeness, wouldn't it? And it can't actually look for wholeness because there's nowhere to look. There's only wholeness. So it's not a matter of recognizing, I mean, it is kind of recognizing, but it's not a matter of recognizing over there, of seeing over there, of seeing wholeness objectively, because it can't be found. It can't be experienced. There's this, it just can't. Because there's only wholeness. There is a felt sense of agency here. There's a felt sense of an individual. There's a felt sense of that there's an independent little agent over here, but there's not. There's just wholeness. See, in that felt sense, who's that occurring to? It's occurring to wholeness. Because there's only wholeness. There's wholeness and only wholeness, and there's nothing that could describe wholeness because it would be part of wholeness, which cannot describe what it. You get it? So yeah, I can't even finish it. It just because it can't be languaged. It just can't be. But that's what we're constantly trying to do. We're constantly trying to language we're constantly trying to language our way into enlightenment. I had to mess with my phone. I got a timer there. I don't want to go too long with this video because if I do, you'll get used to it. And I don't want you getting used to this video. I don't want you to get used to the concept of wholeness. Don't ever get used to it. Just understand that you can't understand it. That's the biggest leap I think I ever took was understanding, oh my God, it can't be understood. And the biggest one, and when I say the leap I ever took, that's just a make-believe Fred telling you a make-believe story about a make-believe experience. But it's still an experience. It may be make-believe. That's absolutely true, but it's not relatively true. It's still, there is this relativeness that has to be dealt with on a day-to-day basis. And I'm going to try to cut another video that's going to be about that. And I am going to cut another video about that. I just can't know if I'm going to cut it right now or not. Because there's just this, and I'm not in control of this because there's no I here. You see that? There's just no I here. There's a sense of an I. Oh, and when Ramana would talk about the I and the I, and all of that, it's a sense. It's a sense. But I had a very, very strong feeling that I had a very, very strong sense that it was going to rain here this morning, and it didn't. So I had a false sense of coming rain. The sense of something is not the same thing as the truth of something. I have a wonderful story that I tell in awakening sessions about that. And it just leaves people open-jawed. Any rate, but I'm not going to share it here because you got to pay for that. Isn't that awful? Isn't that awful? Don't you hate a guy like that? Just tease you. It doesn't matter. You don't need to know that in order to wake up because you're already awake. You are awakeness itself, and there's only awakeness. There's only wholeness. The wholeness. When I say wholeness, I'm saying wholeness. There's no way to get there. There's nothing here but wholeness. There's nothing living. There's nothing that's going to die. There's an experience, which is great. Okay, I'm going to cut out now before you get used to this. See you later. Bye.